beautiful, and welcome back to another episode of Buck's Books. It is I, Buck, and I am here to tell you about books. It has been, I think, 4 or 5 days since the last time I did one of these, which is unusual for me. Did you think I abandoned you? I would never abandon you, just so you know. You are going to have to put up with the agonized shrieking of my washer in the background. It's a little quieter now, but if it suddenly becomes not quiet anymore, that's just something we're going to have to deal with together. Yeah, like that. Today, I would like to tell you about a book I greatly enjoyed. Just finished reading. A highly controversial evolutionary biology psychology book. Name of Survival of the Prettiest. The Science of Beauty by Nancy L. Etcoff. So, right off the bat, you can see why this is going to be a problem, and it was an immense problem for virtually everyone on Goodreads. Even the people who are rating it highly are upset about rating it highly. And that is because of the material presented in the book more than the book itself. So the book itself is very well written. And the concepts are sound. The science is good. Nobody likes what it has to say. Now, I don't care what it has to say is the thing. First things first, I would like to say, do not read this book unless you are yourself confident in your physical appearance or delusional. Because if you have any doubts, this book will find them, and it's just like a little linoleum knife into that doubt and just tear it wide. That's what's going to happen. And that's what happened all over the Goodreads reviews, you see. Because all of these middlingly attractive women came in to read Survival of the Prettiest and decided that what it was actually saying is they weren't the prettiest. And this just caused a meltdown all over the... So if you got a minute, I mean, you can do worse than just scanning the reviews, because it's pretty good. But my position of privilege is I am a boy, so it's less important. And that's not just sexism, that it's a little bit sexism, but it's mostly empirically proven. So that's one of the first things the book talks about. Let's start with the halo effect. If you don't know what the halo effect is, you should. You really have no excuse. The halo effect is the understanding that uggos got it hard. Just the way it is. The prettier you are, the easier life is going to be for you. Universally, across virtually every domain that you will participate in. And that's what the book keeps kind of hammering home. So if you do not consider yourself pretty enough to gain from this privilege, that's gotta hurt. And you don't even need to be that pretty. You just need to believe yourself that pretty to enjoy this book. The whole book is geared toward the evolutionary advantages of being pretty and what we qualify as pretty in the first place. Yeah? And it's the usual suspects. You know, it's symmetry, and it is youth primarily, though even that's a little bit flexible depending on what side of the gender divide you're approaching from. And a lot of it is geared toward functionality. Now, it may come as a surprise to you because I look like this and just kind of let hair grow at random from different parts of my head, but I prize beauty very highly. I think it's one of the most important things in life. I am of the belief that it's one of the reasons that we are alive. I think aesthetics is crucial. Yeah, I am a large proponent of the functional being beautiful, which is why I am not a bodybuilder, but very strong. And I think you should be too. I think it is the duty of every human being to build that physical strength, because that physical strength is a form of beauty. The evolutionary beauty that this book talks about, but also that Socrates talked about. Excuse me if I butcher the Socrates quote, I'm going to try from memory. No man should be an amateur in the realm of physical training. It is a shame that any should die before witnessing the beauty and strength of which their body is capable. Right? That's true. That's solid. So that's sort of my approach. And of course, we talked about Dante Alighieri and La Naturale d'Arte di Dio. I'm sorry, Italians. It's just I tried to read it phonetically off the wall. Nature is the art of God. So art is beautiful. Nature, for the most part, is beautiful, which is why I read the book about survival of the prettiest in the first place, even though I know I am not its intended audience. And the reason I'm not its intended audience is because much of this only sort of laterally applies to me, and I don't have much skin in this game, which brings us back to what I was talking about with the halo effect and why I operate from a position of privilege with regard to this book, because it doesn't matter how pretty I am. I'm a dude. Dude doesn't have to be pretty. A dude just has to be rich and tall and a little bit mean when he talks to girls. And evolutionarily speaking, he's fine. He's all squared away. But yeah, mostly my opinion, but also backed up in the book. It talks about how for women, beauty is paramount. You know, so to not have it, to have an entire 400-page book remind you over and over again, statistically, that you don't have it and what you're missing out on as a result, that's got to be crushing. But for a guy, it's just, in early life, there are advantages for a man to be prettier, to be more traditionally attractive within the confines of what evolution defines as attractive in a human being, which we will touch on later. For example, children are more likely to get attention, like handsome babies, attractive babies, are more likely to get attention from their parents than ugly babies. And that's part of the halo effect as well, because the cuter the baby, the more positive attributes we sort of project onto them. I'm not sure if this showed up in this book or if I read it in another book and I'm just conflating them in my head. But it talked about how if a baby is handsome and quiet, then the adults will often project on it this air of nobility, you know, this thoughtful, this contemplative nature. Whereas if a baby is ugly, if you've got uggo baby and it's quiet, then it has why is he's just like a lump, you know, he's is something wrong with him, he's so withdrawn. So like it's the same thing, we're seeing the same thing and we're just attaching a different context to each of them, you know. We are framing it according to the feelings that we're getting, because the baby is either handsome Squidward or terrified sleepless Squidward. I hope I can find those Squidwards later when I put this. So much for the symmetry. When I put this up on the editing. So that's an advantage. And then obviously through school you'll get better grades just for being prettier. The prettier you are, like the better looking you are, the more conventionally attractive you are, you'll get better grades even if you don't deserve better grades, because people will like you more just by looking at you. So if you don't consider yourself a beneficiary of that sucks. that sucks to consider. But at a certain point, dudes just kind of age out of the handsome thing, you know? They don't get quite as many benefits. They still, I mean, do better in dating, but they're not any happier. And that's true on both sides of the gender divide. Women also, if they're prettier, they tend to marry younger and marry up, you know, marry that men who are more educated than them and more financially successful than them. But same doesn't go for men. Prettier men don't get any economic benefits necessarily, aside from the ones that they can garner from the halo effect. That is to say, prettier men, more handsome men, because prettier men kind of has a connotation. More traditionally attractive, conventionally attractive men do not gain the same sort of economic benefits in dating and relationships as do prettier women. That just doesn't happen, according to the research. So, a dude ages out of it. After a certain point, what a dude needs to do is make money. If a dude makes money, then he's still in the running, you know, for these superior genes, because that's what evolution's about. It's eugenics. It's eugenics all the way down. For women, it's hard for the ladies. It's hard out there for the ladies, especially ugly ladies. That's rough. So then you have these markets, you know, these corporations who are like, don't worry. Just because nature denied you your birthright doesn't mean you have to live like that. Now we can give this to you. You just need to buy the product. We just need you to get the product. And then you go and you get the product and you get more lustrous hair and you get the makeup that turns this part of your eye blue, and then you're beautiful, right? But like, kinda, it works. Makeup kinda works, but it's also one of those false signals that we talked about in the How Women Got Their Curves reviews. Remember the false signals? The ones that betoken the fraudulent fitness. It's not an accurate reflection of the fitness that you're trying to suggest. Well, what gives? That's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair, is what it comes down to. So then we get into the cutting, the surgery. We have this explosion in plastic surgery. It talks about the plastic surgery and just cutting chunks out and putting new chunks on. And once upon a time, pretty much just adult film stars did that surgery. And now it's just housewives. Everybody's getting sliced up. People are just getting their face cut just all the time. Pursuit of this ideal. But the ideal... the ideal is culturally suggested, right? But our modern culture doesn't necessarily reflect the evolutionary ideal, which sort of overrules the cultural dicta, okay? So, to elaborate on that, when it talks about pretty, when it talks about what makes pretty, it's very straightforward, and if you've read even a single evolutionary biology book, you already know the answer to this. But I'm going to assume you're here because you want me to babble about it. So I will, for you, because I care. The first thing is symmetry. Things have to be equal. That's what handsome looks like. Now, you can see that my nose is not. It twists to the side. That's okay. That's because it got busted up. It got hooked on the way out when I was being born. Yeah, I was born with a broken nose and 2 black eyes, and it's been downhill from there. Things just keep getting worse. So, I consider it the flaw that makes the masterpiece, which brings us back to the delusion. I was able to benefit from this book because A, I'm just so much ego, dude, and B, it doesn't matter that much because I've aged out. I've aged out of when I was going to get the benefits on this anyway. So, it's all good for me, but I am sorry for you. I am sorry for you, the entire Goodreads comment thread, the entire Goodreads review thread on Survival of the Prettiest. Times are tough all around. Symmetry is something you can play with a little bit, you know, like Marilyn Monroe and the beauty marks, because that draws attention to the non-symmetry. But that just emphasizes the rest of the symmetry. And ultimately, symmetry is an excellent indicator of strong genetics and health. Because asymmetry is decidedly not. Now, don't give anything in a bundle. No bees in any bonnets here, because no one is symmetrical entirely. It just doesn't happen. Nature is so complicated, dude. And that's like, I think we should look to it, you know? I think it should be sort of like the North Star, the guiding compass point that we move toward. but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is something that we can take as gospel, you know? So, like, I don't think that necessarily... I don't think you can be, like, a orthodox nature guy, necessarily, you know? You can't subscribe entirely to the nature's sort of fiat, because we don't know that well. We just have sort of suggestions and impressions, and they're all sort of malleable. When we look at the human body, it's generally symmetrical. We got 2 arms and 2 legs, and they tend to be on the same side. And look at the same, or opposite sides. Yeah, same side would be weird, dude. When we got the eyes in the middle and the mouth tends to be in the middle, everything is lined up down the center line, and that's how they teach you how to draw, too. You're supposed to be lined up down the center line. But there are fluctuations that will come from just, I hesitate to say birth defects, but like, how about genetic factors? There's genetic factors, there's nutritional factors, there's environmental factors, any number of things. There's the use factors, you know, if you just, you can get, if you just train like one side more, you'll have more muscular development on one side. Well, like pitchers, like dudes who throw, they have way more muscular development in their shoulders and everything that is throwing the ball on just the one arm. So over time, that leads to all of these imbalances down the rest of the chain. That's just how it happens. So if you've got a situation where one is bigger than the other, you're supposed to. That's how nature works. One is always bigger than the other, almost. So as a result, we see the perfection that is presented by the mean-old media, and we think that we are failing to meet the criteria for perfection, and we are, because perfection is fake, and the mean-old media is made up, and they have millions of dollars and the finest cosmetics, and they all got their faces cut, and then they got photoshopped after the fact. So it's a dream. You're competing with an impossible dream. And when we're bombarded with this information, I know this is just like party line third wave feminism, but it's true. When we're being bombarded by these super stimuli all the time that are showing us these angels, you know, they're not even people anymore. They've ascended. They're these impossible forms. And we see them just every time we scroll on the phone that we scroll on for at least 6 hours a day. And I mean, I think the average is between 4 and 6. I know it's something ridiculous like that. So you're always looking at the phone, and your brain is just being bombarded at all times by this is what a human being is supposed to look like. And you forget what a human being is supposed to look like. But a human being is supposed to have, like, warts and all. You know, a human being is supposed to be a little asymmetrical. And what's wild is one of the studies they did was to try to figure out what we consider to be the most attractive. Because beauty, okay, symmetry, but what else? You know, because Marilyn Monroe is like this, she remains this figurehead, and she's asymmetrical. So, it must be something. You know, there's so many variations. You can't, like, if you ask any 10 people who the most beautiful person they ever saw was, you'll get 10 completely different answers. And how are you going to make, like, a pastiche out of that? What conclusions can you draw from that, you know? Cleopatra was... Cleopatra or Helen of Troy? I think it was Helen of Troy. One of them, she talks about how she's this... no, it was Helen of Troy, because we kind of know what Cleopatra looks like. So, Helen of Troy launched 1,000 ships or whatever. This incredible beauty that started the Trojan War. Nothing was ever written about what she looked like except that she was pretty. We don't know. Pretty could mean anything. So, how do we figure that out? Beyond the confines of what evolution has set us, which is general symmetry and health. So they ran these studies. And the studies were to determine what kind of traits were selected for. So general studies, they pulled a bunch of college students, mostly psychology students, because they're the only ones who ever participate in studies because you get credit for it. And which is a terrible idea, because if you're a psychology student, you're insane. The only reason you go into psychology is if you're insane. So all of this is an aside. Excuse this digression. I digress. Excuse it, but it needs to be said. All of the information that comes out of colleges that we send out to have kids vote, and we try to generalize to the human species, it doesn't generalize to humans at large. It generalizes not even to college students, but to mentally ill college students. Because the college students that are usually polled are going to be psychology students, because they're the ones participating in psychology experiments because they have to for course credit, right? And just, I don't know if you've ever spoken to a psychology major or a therapist, like privately, like when they take off their weird little Hannibal Lecter mask and they're just out on their own, but like, whew, whew. All right, so thank you for indulging that. So they brought all these psychology students in and they showed them all of these different pictures. They said, okay, so we need you to rank these people from least attractive to most attractive. And they did this with however many dozens or hundreds, I don't remember. It was a pretty good sample size. And what they found universally was that the ones that were ranked highest, the most attractive faces, right down the line, were of people who didn't exist. They were simulated faces put together by AI by combining a whole bunch of other reasonably attractive faces. So there were people, real people, who were probably like more beautiful. If you saw them, like they'd be stunning. You'd be like, take your breath away if you saw them in public. And then they were ranked as less attractive than these averages that a computer built, right? So there are two ways to look at that. I mean, one is that AI is not sophisticated enough to throw in the sort of artistic license that you can get from actual nature. So there will be minor flaws that did not show up in the AI's rendering. But I don't know if that works, because I don't know if you've seen much AI art, but have you seen what they do to fingers? And then the other one is that we're just drawn to that average. Average is what beautiful is. Average is what we find pretty. These averages of these faces. Well, how the hell do you explain that? How do you find someone who looks average? Right? So, nuts. Crazy. So that's kind of screws with the entire concept of how beauty in a person. Like when you see a beautiful human being, it's because they are unique and they stand out in some way, and they stand out because they're so beautiful. But now we're finding that the beauty that makes them stand out is exactly the opposite. It is not a standing out beauty. It stands out because we can identify them as beautiful, because they're symmetrical and they have a good waist to hip ratio. Statistically speaking, if you're talking about beauty in women, that's what it is. You're looking at a good waist to hip ratio and like a decent body fat percentage, because no matter what, if it's too high or too low, then everything goes out the window. So, and then the face just has to be lined up, And for men, sort of the same thing, although beauty standards, evolutionary beauty standards in men, are more focused on things that make them more physically powerful and imposing, like a heavy brow ridge for absorbing, blows, and what else did it talk about? Wider set eyes are generally deemed more attractive, but this fluctuates, because with women, it's easy to gauge what attractive is, because men have the one setting. Like if you talk, no matter what time of day or year it is, if you just grab a guy and you're like, hey, here's two women, tell me which one is prettier, like it doesn't matter, it's instantaneous. So that gives us reliable report for one side of that particular divide, but then when you look at the other, women fluctuate so wildly in what they like just based on their hormone profile, right? So depending on the phase of their cycle, a woman will be attracted to radically different men, assuming she's attracted to any men at all at that moment, if a woman is on birth control, and it talks about this in the book, how these women are on birth control and they find men, and then they date them forever and they decide to get off birth control, and they get off birth control and they're disgusted They're disgusted by their partners of 5 years. They can't even stand their smell anymore. Because that's not the kind of man that the birth control that was distorting your perception of what you thought you liked drew you to in the first place. You know, the birth control was blunting that sort of reproductive response. That's the point of the birth control. And now that you're actually ovulating and looking for a man that you'd be attracted to, you're not attracted to that guy because he was attractive to you when you weren't trying to find someone who was a potential reproductive mate. Yeah? So, you figure that, and then you try to gather multiple cohorts of psychology major women at different phases of their cycle, you know, on different levels of birth control, experiencing different dietary, you know, because statistically speaking, 1 in 4 college-age women are going to have an eating disorder, which is going to largely impact what's going on hormonally, you know. And then you say, okay, rate these men according to what you find more attractive. And it's just absolute chaos. There's no way to rely on any of the data coming from there because the entire, every cohort that you're drawing from is just completely randomized on a level that you cannot control, that you don't even know about, that they don't even know about half the time. So what is a boy to do? How do you extract information from that? Well, generally speaking, all you can get from that is broad strokes. No pun intended. I mean, intended a little bit. A little bit, pun intended. And it seems to be mostly focused on height. I'm sorry, man. I wish it could be some other way, but it's height. It's height and it's muscularity, because again, as we established, that is a fitness indicator that cannot be faked. And symmetry. Those are the ones that are the physical attributes that tend to be described as most appealing, you know, by women at large, by the feminine hive mind for men. But again, how are you gonna take that on faith? Look at all of the flaws we just found, not even in the design, but in the population we're trying to design from. And that is not to suggest that you're flawed. You're all perfect. All of you are perfect. So don't read this book, because if you do, your feelings will be hurt. But if you think that you're pretty or just really tough, then go ahead and read the book. It's a really interesting book. I liked it a lot. It was very well researched. The author is a neuroscientist, so she knows her stuff. I expect it to be more like social constructionist, and it wasn't at all. And then I found out from the reviews like 40 minutes ago that Survival of the Prettiest was written as a sort of rebuttal to the beauty myth. I'm never going to read the beauty myth, because that is social constructionist, and I don't care about that. I'm out of college. When you're out of college, you don't need to care about social constructionism anymore. Oh, I should delete that, actually. Everyone's going to be real mad about that. Nah, hell with it, I'll leave it in. It talked about the unfair advantages that the pretties have over the uggos. It talked about all the face cuts. It talked about the products and how they sell an illusion. And we just keep on buying. We love an illusion, man. And then it talked about fashion at great length, and I didn't retain any of that. I don't care about any of that. I am just like a straight dude. So fashion is something that I should care about more. I know that. I know that's something that is like very important in 2025, but I just cannot force myself to do it. And hopefully that won't always matter. But if you're interested in fashion, I'm sure there was good information in the fashion chapters, because they went on forever. So go ahead and help yourself to that. Overall, I'm going to give the book a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I'm going to take a star off because of the fashion chapters, because they went on forever and they were very, very boring. And I don't think it really pertains to evolution, in my humble opinion. But once again, this book was not for me. Despite the fact this book wasn't for me, I think I enjoyed this book far more than most people who it was for. What do you think? Are you outraged? Are you optimistic now? Has this given you a new lease on life? Tell me in the comments. We'll have a little conversation about it, a little dialogue. Like, comment, subscribe, dude, share. I don't know. Whatever buttons are on YouTube, just start clicking those buttons if you would. Really appreciate that. That makes a big difference when you just start clicking buttons on my videos. I don't know what all of them do, but I suspect you do if you somehow found like my booktube on YouTube. That's got to be a deep dive. So like, thanks. So just start clicking buttons and we'll see what we can do with it. If there's any book you want to hear about, I'll add it to the roster. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck out there, beautiful